Alrighty, so it is week 2 in CIT 93, and this might look familiar because this is the same time as just after I recorded week 1. Did you know in some movies, many movies, they actually record the last scene of the movie first or the first scene of the movie last in order to know kind of so actors can get the feel for like the characters and all those things. So depending on their goals, they may do that. I do that as well with this because I have gone through and created the content for week 1, 2, and 3 before the start of the semester. It gives me a pretty good idea of things I would kind of give you a heads up about or things I want to make sure I talk about. So if it looks familiar, there's a reason. Okay, so a couple things. In this week, we're going to start looking at, because you'll have a code along assignment that I'll teach you what that means to do code alongs. You'll have another code along assignment for variables, and again, those two are code along to where you're coding along with me. Then you share that with me, that's your assignment. And then you'll have a discussion. Okay, so it's generally right your attendance and one code along, and then for the Thursday night item, it's another code along and discussion. Thing I would say to you is that this is one of those classes. I'm going to sound like a teacher that it really does help to work ahead. And the reason is if you work ahead and you miss something, right, you can resubmit for full points. And I know I've talked about the whole late work thing, and I definitely want to be more understanding. And at some point, we all have to be responsible to get work done. Just know if you do miss work, I do put 0 in the grade so that that won't be a complete surprise to you. 0 in the grade would mean you've missed that due date, right? But I have also said communication is really important. And by the way, even if you miss it and I put a 0, you can still complete it. It would be 25% reduced in points. Okay? All right. So, why did I get off on that topic? Oh, yeah. So, working ahead, talking you through what's coming this week. In the discussion this week, we get introduced to the carbon footprint as a website. Okay? And we're gonna end up every week coding something about that carbon footprint, how to calculate it. And I actually did give quite a bit of time to choosing this particular one. And after I chose it, I wanted it to just say the following. Like, when we're doing the carbon footprint, it's really, it might seem very natural that we're trying to say that if you have a lower score, it's better. Okay, yes, in general, that's true. But it's also to say, just to understand the things that get fed and like what makes our carbon footprint. And the thing I would say to you is when you do that work, don't feel like you have to share your actual numbers. You could make up numbers because all you're doing is following the, in this case, logic of each of the 8 categories that we end up programming through the course. But for this assignment, you'll just go in and actually what we call hard code numbers. So when you share, right, when you end up looking at, I show you my score in the reviewing it. I just want you to know it is not the goal to make anybody feel bad. Okay. It's okay not to share your actual own numbers when you do this, right? And it is good to also understand what your carbon footprint is. The part of the reason I chose this was that I'm really passionate about sustainability, about environmental related topics. As an example, I'm here in my house, not that far from campus. I've created a system, and I'm privileged to be able to do this, that is almost 95% off the grid. It's self-sustaining. The grid meaning electricity. I still use water, but I minimize my water impacts. I walk a lot. I try not to drive. I do have an electrical car, but I charge it mostly from the sun. But that's because I have been privileged to be able to invest in those things. And I don't want any student to feel like, and I'm repeating myself, that their score actually their, real score for themselves that they may calculate is any kind of judgment, because trust me, that's not what the assignment's for. Okay, so let me just say a word about dev work. You're going to see it, and I forgot to do this in week 1, so I'll do it now. I pulled up my schedule where I had set this up. So every week you have weekly work. Remember, you're seeing that this week. This is our first full normal week, where we have code alongs and discussions, and that makes up the weekly work. And then dev work will start in week 9. So at the midway point, then I will give you requirements and you will write and create an app. Now that app is going to be a decision-making app, okay? And we're going to break it down week by week, giving you specific requirements. Here's the thing you can know about that work, is that you're not going to be asked to do anything you haven't seen coded already. As a matter of fact, the carbon footprint app is definitely a little more involved than what you would need to do for your dev work, but you are going to need to code based on the requirements that I've provided. Okay, and then this is where in week I was struggling a little bit in the welcome was to remember, but it's week 11 that the window opens. And I'll be talking about that as we move through the course. But basically what you're going to do is sign up for a session, right? And again, you can start that here at week 11. If you were ready to sign up for a code review session, you would need to be completely caught up with the coursework, right, in order to do that. So when we get there, you'll see this, but then you'll have until week 18, right? So it's okay to wait. Just know that the more you wait, the more content we cover, the more that could come up in code review. And so yes, I'm incentivizing you to do it early. But it's also, you might think about this, if you're somebody that wants to learn more about programming languages, you might want to wait a little bit to do it as well, right? But more than anything, part of the reason I've set this schedule up is really to help students keep on track. Because yes, I have late work, and yes, I've talked about that process. I talked about it today. But what I really want you to do is stay focused so that when we get closer to the code review, if you're somebody that wants to do it early, you're set up to do that. Okay, so that, again, I'll give you signups as we move closer. Now, the thing I realized after I looked at this content that I didn't talk about, and I'm providing a link here, is under MDN, and at this point I believe I have talked about Mozilla Developer Network. They have this wonderful guide, and I've given you, matter of fact, it's right here if you ever want to. When you go to Mozilla just directly, but I've given you a link to the JavaScript, and this is important because I had talked about that you're learning JavaScript, but you're learning a particular flavor of JavaScript, which is called client side, right? So this is everything that happens on the browser side. There is a server side scripting that's called Node.js. I love Node.js as well, but in this case you were focused on front-end developer related implementations. Front-end developer just means like if every website you've ever been to, there's been a developer that's focused on the front end of that website to focus on, not only from a design standpoint, possibly, unless there's a designer, but also the interactivity you would have with that website. Okay, so that process is called front-end development. It does give some prerequisites, like I talked about already. I don't cover HTML and CSS unless it's related to what specifically we need. I do teach classes on those topics. Love to have you in there. But in this case, I definitely recommend checking out First Steps, okay? I think First Steps is really good when you scroll down through here. Actually, what is JavaScript? So First Steps, what is JavaScript? Looking at this, I think is really helpful to understand, just give you a little more time to understand the context of which we're going to be working in. This guide, I use it kind of various places in the course. I do use MDN as a organizing site. I've really used it because it is the primary reference for JavaScript that's used by all JavaScript people. The problem with MDN itself is that it's written for people who have more knowledge, and so these guides that they've put out have been really helpful in that sense. So I just want to give you that. Definitely recommend checking those out. And then on your discussion, so in your last item for this week, in week 2, there in the discussions I talk about looking at code. And I tried to say in that recording for that first discussion the importance of writing code on your own and then actually looking at other people's code. So, really take that suggestion to heart and understand that's where you learn. Because one of the things I could ask you in code review is actually to code something with me. Okay, like I give you a requirement and I say, okay, code this concept. And this concept would be, of course, something we've covered. But if you haven't actually sat behind a keyboard and coded it, it can be even more nerve-wracking to have somebody say, do this, right? And not only that, you just need time behind the keyboard. We call this muscle memory, to where you actually learn to write good code. And part of it's just understanding the structure, the syntax, and that's what you're getting in some of these first assignments. So please take that to heart. Okay, so in this reply, because this reply is different than the week 1 reply. The week 1 reply was really in a submission just to me directly, but in this week, this is a discussion, right? So it's actually a graded discussion. Now I say graded. Oh, actually it's not 100 points. It's 1 point. That's my attendance. So this is how I show attendance to the campus. I'm glad I saw that. I got to fix it. So this grade that I will give you 1.0 if you need to do it on Monday of the start of the week. I generally release early, so in this case I'm releasing very early, right? But in this discussion I often will ask you to remark on a specific part of what I've talked about. And what I'd like to do this week is, in general, are there any questions related to anything I've talked about? But specifically, if there's not, do you understand my description of what code reviews are in this class? And if not, now's a great time to ask. Alrighty. Have a fun week, and look in the syllabus for my office hours. Hope you've joined Discord at this point. Hope you've know Zach's schedule and my schedule. And I look forward to connecting with you. Have a good one.